Hey everybody, Steve Prziborowski. Welcome back. Episode 12 of How to Excel at Fire Department Promotional Exams. Episode 12 is going to discuss the next step in the promotional process, the fire chief's interview. So we've talked about some of the things the fire chief is looking for. Now let's talk about the interview itself. In many departments, you're going to find that the fire chief usually has the final say. Sometimes it's the city manager, but a lot of times the fire chief. And there may be a final interview with him or her and or their command staff. So let's get going and discussing more about the chief's interview. As a reminder, my website, code3firetrain.com, is a free stuff link with lots of great information on there to help you be the best you can be, regardless of the rank that you're aspiring to. So promotional preparation information, officer development information, leadership, training information, lots of great stuff there. All right. These webinars are based off of one of the 3 books I've had published, How to Excel at Fire Department Promotional Exams, which is available off my website, code3firetrain.com. So let's talk a little bit more. In the last episode, number 11, we discussed the 4th part of the question, what is the fire chief looking for? And again, by now, you hopefully realize that every chief looks for maybe something different. Why? Because they're human. You put 25 fire chiefs in a line and ask them what the one thing is they're looking for. I bet you'll find a lot of similar answers. Serve the community, ethical, service above self, leadership, integrity, all those things. You'll find a lot of similarities, but you may not find the exact same things. So let's focus on now the chief's interview. You selling yourself to that fire chief to make a decision. All right, here's some thoughts in the fire chief's interview. You've probably already had a first level oral interview that might have been with a panel of other raters. They may have been from within your department or maybe outside of your department. These raters were probably at least one rank above. Now in the chief's interview, it's sometimes very similar, but sometimes different. So know your civil service rules, which every city, every county, every governmental agency has some type of rules. Whether you call them civil service or not, there's usually rules of engagement for promotional processes, just like there is what to wear, what time to report to work, how to call in sick, when to call in sick. So know the rules related to the testing process so you don't, I guess, have any false hopes, for example. Not every fire chief does an interview. I've known some fire chiefs that just promote people based off the list. Okay, you're number 1, you're getting the first badge. Number 2, second badge. But a lot of fire chiefs want to take that time to just sit down with the candidate. And I'll talk about what the process entails, but it could be anything across the board. It could be as simple as 10 minutes, as much as 45 minutes. I mean, yeah, our last chief, before, when he first started doing fire chief interviews, it was really just about a 5-minute interview. And it was really just like, all right, here's my expectations. Boom, 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 boom. Got any questions? Pretty straightforward. No. Okay, here's your badge. I mean, it's pretty matter of fact. And you know what? It seemed to work for him. And then after a while, he's like, you know what? I want to not just share my expectations, but I want to ask the candidate some questions. Let's make this a conversation. Yeah, I'm going to hire 1, 2, 3, but maybe there's a good reason that I find out something in the interview that I maybe want to skip over somebody. I mean, hey, those things can happen. And then, like I said, it could be as much as 45 minutes. So usually not going to be more than an hour, but expect to have some time in the room. It may be with the chief, just themselves and you, or it could be the chief and his or her second in command, or it could be a number of their command staff members. I mean, it could be like a whole gauntlet of, okay, the fire chief, the assistant chief, deputy chief 1, 2, 3, 4, to be like, oh my gosh. Hey, if you can't handle the stress at that level, hey, I don't know, maybe you're not going to be successful upon promotion. But here's the thing. I know a lot of people I used to get stressed over, when I was a firefighter captain, even battalion chief. I remember every time I go into the fire chief's office, it was such a stressful situation. I mean, I've known all of our fire chiefs very comfortably and had great working relationships, but it seems like just weird. You cross that threshold and it's like, hey, have a seat, Steve. And you're like, oh, shit. Okay, yeah, I'll stand here. Nah, be comfortable. And it's just like, I don't know why it was that way, but it just, I mean, we've had very non-intimidating chiefs. I mean, very comfortable chiefs that would, be able to have a conversation with you. I mean, but I know some can be very intimidating, especially if they're dressed in a Class A uniform and, no sense of humor. But when I became a deputy chief, God, almost 10 years ago, I realized that, the fire chief is just like me. He puts his pants on just like I do every day. He's a human being. And you know what? I know that's easier said than done, but it's helped me over the years because ever since that point of becoming a deputy chief, I've countless times of going into the fire chief's office for whatever reason, meetings, updates, briefings, sometimes interviews, whether it's him interviewing me or me and him and others interviewing somebody else. You can't get intimidated by those folks. Again, they're human beings, and it is what it is. It could be a formality. Like I said, one of our previous chiefs used to just, here's my expectations. Got any questions? Perfect. Here's the badge. Don't screw it up. Or it could be a deal breaker, meaning, okay, I'm going to ask you some questions here. Or not just ask you some questions. Okay, hey, Ralph, tell me about the situation that happened to you about a year ago. Remember about a year ago when you found yourself, how do I say this to you, Ralph? Remember when you got suspended because of your on or off duty behavior for doing this? Oh, shit, I thought the chief would forget that. Sure. Yeah, Ralph, so in the year since you've come back to work after being suspended, what have you learned from the process? If I promote you, are you going to continue that behavior, or have you learned from your past mistakes? Hey, it can happen. So what do they say about bad behavior and bad things that have happened? Time, distance, and shielding. So the longer it's been since it happened, the better for you. The more you can prove to them that, you know what, that was a one point in time mistake that I made, and I've learned from my mistakes. I will never do that mistake again, or at least I'll try my best to not make the same mistake again. I'll make other mistakes. So it could be a formality or deal breaker. So be prepared for things, anything's fair game, especially from your history with the department. So, the chief is going to have probably access to maybe your personnel file, application, resume. Here's something else to think about. In our department, before the fire chief makes the final decision, he'll usually go around, he'll ask the assistant chief, he'll ask the deputy chiefs, he'll ask even the battalion chiefs. So if we're looking at promoting a new battalion chief or new captain, he'll walk around, and our previous chiefs have done this too, of like, hey, any thoughts on John Smith? And of course, most people will usually be honest about it, but the fire chief's trying to get a pulse, because the last thing the fire chief wants to do is promote somebody that, of course, then the next thing you know, the battalion chiefs or his commander or her command staff is going, why'd you promote that knucklehead or that loser or that slacker or that whatever? Well, you know what? Think about it. The fire chief's way up here in the ivory tower. I say that jokingly, but the fire chief is usually far removed from the line. Even if a fire chief tries their best, as ours does, to get down and hang out at fire stations, talk to the troops, connect with the troops, they're still separated by a few ranks. So sometimes they're not on the pulse. A lot of times the fire chief thinks that, hey, I guess they're doing a good job, that person, that, that firefighter, that captain, that battalion chief, because I don't hear anything about them. No news is good news. Well, sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not. So again, realize that some of your bosses may be asked about you, so hopefully keep that in mind. Some other points. Know your resume and your application inside and out, because like I just mentioned, the chief, those are fair game for the chief to ask you any questions off. Sometimes the chief may have a script in mind of what questions they want to ask. Sometimes there may be no questions. Maybe they've already looked at your resume, the application, your cover letter, whatever you had to submit, and they're already maybe highlighting or circling key things they want to ask you or follow up on. So be prepared to, oh shit, I didn't think you'd ask me that one, chief. Well, you know what? Guess what? He did. She did. Know yourself inside and out. Your strengths, your weaknesses, your goals, your objectives. Where do you want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, whatever. What do you plan to do your first day on the job in your newly promoted position, your first 3 months, your first 6 months, your first year, whatever it is? What do you want to do to leave the department and the position better? So know yourself inside and out. Know the fire department inside and out. By now, if you're taking a promotional exam in the department, this is the no-brainer. Well, knowing yourself inside and out should be a no-brainer, because that's you. You've been alive since day one, whereas the department, you got hired on at a certain point. But again, know the department, the jurisdiction inside and out, because you never know what questions they may ask of you. Who knows? Hey, so Steve, what is the current hot button that the city is dealing with right now? Huh? The fire department chief? No, the city. What's one of the issues that our city council is dealing with right now that, may affect the fire department? That's a fair game question. You can't just say, well, chief, I just want to be a captain. I'm just taking the captain's test. Or I'm just taking the battalion chief's test. Well, I don't care what rank you're going for. You should be aware of city politics. And thankfully, it's very easy with the internet. You can access city council meeting agendas, video recordings, meeting minutes of past meetings. Yeah, that's the type of stuff, especially if you're going for captain and above, you need to be familiar with. Because guess what? Some of that stuff may be affecting your department budget in a good or not so good way. Politics, budgets, everything else. Know things inside and out. Be prepared for any question. I mean, literally any question. Questions that the fire chief could answer. You know, sometimes these are basic questions that you may have already gotten. But again, there should never be a trick question. When I hear people say, "Oh, that's a good question," oh shit, Sherlock. Think about that. If it's do you think the oral board or the fire chief wants to ask you stupid or dumb questions? No, they want to ask you good questions. I know that's just a lot of people just try to start off and, you know, lighten the conversation. Oh yeah, that's a good question, while they're buying themselves time to think. But there are no trick questions, seriously. I know most people come out of promotional oral boards going, those are pretty easy questions. Yeah, of course they were. We're not here to trick you up. We're here to try to bring the best of you out so we can make the best possible decision on who to promote. So obviously you should know, which you should have already, I mean, in these you should have already known before you even before you even applied for the test. Why you want the position, how you prepared for the position, you know, your career plans and goals. Would you work a 40-hour week? Yeah, there's a lot of chiefs that do this. I remember a chief of mine in Florida, a friend of mine, good buddy of mine in Florida, he always asked this question when he was promoting battalion chiefs. And I remember he was telling me a story recently. He goes, oh yeah, because I ask this question all the time. And of course, I only usually have a shift battalion chief, because he has 3 battalion chiefs, A, B, C shift. And then he has a 4th battalion chief that's a 40-hour training battalion chief. Very common in small departments to have 1 on each shift, and then maybe a 40-hour BC, admin, training ops, whatever. And as we all know, most firefighters would die before they work that 40-hour spot. They want that shift spot. I get it. Well, I remember him saying, because I always ask the question, and he goes, of course, everybody answers always, oh yeah, chief, I'll work any position. And of course they realize the only open position usually is just a shift position, because the shift battalion chief on B shift just retired, and that's the vacancy. Well, don't always assume that's the case, because some chiefs like to shake up the deck. Sometimes our chiefs in the past have said, hey, just because the deputy chief operations retired, or the deputy chief of training, or the battalion chief on A shift retired, does not mean that that's where you're going to go. I may shake up the deck a little bit, and I know a lot of the candidates go, well, but I'm a good fit for training, and that's the vacancy. Yeah, but just because you're the best fit for position doesn't mean that's the best person for the position. Sometimes the best things the chief can do is take us out of our comfort zone. You may hate fire prevention, but you know what? You'll learn a hell of a lot if they put you in that position. Then I know some candidates, well, I'll retire if they put me in fire prevention. Well, okay, so be it. Don't make threats to your fire chief. It doesn't usually go over well. And you know what? You may actually like it, and you'll probably learn a hell of a lot. That's the way it is. But back to this. So my buddy Mike, he goes, yeah, this one guy, I interviewed him about a year ago. And of course I go, hey, you know, battalion chief candidate, would you ever work a 40-hour position? And of course, at the time, most candidates usually, of course, chief, I'd work any shift available, any position available. Just put me in, coach. And most of the time it never comes to reality, because usually they land on a shift and hey, that's how it goes. Well, apparently one of these guys that said he would do it and it got promoted, about a year later, the 40-hour spot came available. And of course, the other 2 senior battalion chiefs on shift, of course, didn't want to do the position. So guess who's going to get this position now? Mike goes, okay. So I call up this guy, hey, Tom, or whatever his name was. Hey, how you doing? How's the wife and kids? Blah, blah. Hey, got some good news and some not so good news, but what do you want first? Oh, chief, why don't you go for the not so good news? Well, you know, hey, whatever. And he goes, hey, by the way, starting whatever, Monday, October, whatever, you're going to be now the new training battalion chief assigned to a 40-hour week. Hey, Tom, you still there, Tom? You okay? Annie, are you okay? So help, someone called 911. They passed out. They coded. Yeah, you know how that goes. Mike goes, you still there? Yeah, chief, bad connection. So what were you saying, chief? Yeah, I got a 40-hour vacancy for you in training. So any questions? You're going to report this day, and I need you to touch base with whatever the deputy chief beforehand to make sure you get your work schedule figured out and blah, 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 answer any questions, make sure we get you set up and everything else. Well, Chief, you know, and this is the funny part. Chief, this is really not a good time in my life right now. You know, I just started going back to college, you know, my one kid's, you know, having some issues at home and blah, blah. And my buddy Mike, this was the guy complaining and whining. Hey, remember about a year ago when you were in my office interviewing, and remember I was taping that interview? You want me to tape back the portion that you promised that when I asked you that question, would you work a 40-hour week? You would say, of course I would, Chief. I would do anything you asked. 40-hour shift work, whatever. Again, crickets. Mike goes, so I realize situations can change, home life can change. I'm not here to wreck your home life, but are you basically lying to me now? Because did you just lie to get the promotion? And thankfully, it was a wise individual that realized Mike was not asking him if he wanted the position. Mike was telling him in a casual, indirect way. He was ordering him. And finally, the guy figured out and said, okay, Chief, how long is the assignment for? 2 years, or unless you promote above that or retire. Oh, no, Chief, I got it. Okay, I'll see you on whatever. Yeah, be careful what you say, because you know what? Your chief may be taping it, if not taping it, recording it, taking notes. Now, some may say, well, what if I say no to a 40-hour week? I'm honest. I don't want to work a 40-hour week. I'll be honest. I don't want to lie to the chief. Hey, be honest. Don't promise something that you can't deliver. One of our retired captains, I remember he was asked this question by one of our fire chiefs. And I remember he came back. I go, hey, how'd your test go? Because I was his battalion chief. He goes, yeah. He goes, the chief asked me if I'd work a 40-hour week. He goes, I told him no. He goes, I live 2 hours away. I'm not going to move closer. I'm not going to do that to my family. He goes, I mean, I was respectful to him, but I go, no, Chief, if I can't get a 56-hour shift position, you know, you can pass me over for somebody else. And I know some people could say that maybe as arrogant or whatever. No. He was just being honest. And the chief, okay. I mean, in all honesty, there were no 40-hour positions at the time. And the odds of him getting one were a lot slimmer than my buddy out in Florida's situation, because there was, you know, a lot less people in the size of the department. But again, the guy was honest, and this guy was always a straight shooter till the day he retired and even beyond that. So I think that's the key, is be true to yourself, but realize sometimes it may go for you or may go against you, but just don't ever be in that position to have the chief call you a liar, because now your ethics, your credibility, your trust are in question. I mentioned earlier, know your strengths and weaknesses. Have at least 3 good strengths and weaknesses. I encourage you to try to find 3 weaknesses, but more importantly, don't just say a weakness. Share something that you're doing to work on that weakness. And also about weaknesses, make sure they're not deal breakers. What I mean by a deal breaker, let's say you're interviewing me for your fire chief's position. You're the union president, and you're interviewing me to be your next fire chief. Hey, Steve, what's your greatest weakness? I'm not a people person, but I'm working on that, though. That's a deal breaker. Or, you know, I think my listening skills are not the best right now. I think I need to, what was the question again? I'm sorry, what did you say again? Oh, yeah, I think my listening skills suck right now. You know, I'm trying to work on them, but, you know, I'm sorry, what was the question? That's not going to work either. So try to have weaknesses that are weaknesses, but not deal breakers for the position you're applying for. Don't just plan for the current position. You should always have the next goal in mind. Now, maybe the promotion that you're seeking right now is the one you want to end up at, and that's fine. I mean, not everyone is meant to promote to every rank or fill every rank. Some are meant just to stay as firefighters, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes the best thing a person can do for themselves and for others is be a great firefighter. That's okay. But if nobody ever promoted, then we'd have a problem, because we'd always have to hire from the outside. And just like on the flip side, if everybody wanted to promote, then we'd have a lot of unhappy people, because we can't promote everybody. Plus, not everyone's meant for every position. But have an idea of what you're looking for in the future, because you think about it, your fire chief is interviewing you. He or she is not just looking for this current position. They're maybe looking, you know, 2, 3, 4 chess moves in the future. Because you think about it, a fire chief, when they're doing their entry-level firefighter hiring, a good fire chief is looking at those brand new recruits on day 1 in the academy, and they're going, you know what, in this room, there's probably at least hopefully one future captain, one future battalion chief, maybe even a future fire chief or deputy chief 20, 30 years down the road. That's good succession planning, and that's what good fire chiefs do. So again, if you truly just want to be a captain and that's what you're preparing for and that's what you're in the room for, be honest. Don't say, well, chief, I want to be a captain, then maybe about 5 years I'll take the battalion chief test if you don't want to, because now you're lying. Then just say, you know what, chief, you know, at this point right now, I'm focusing on being the best captain that I could be. I'm not really interested in promoting to battalion chief or above. It's not really in my skill set. I don't think I have the appropriate fit for the position. It could change. It may not change, but right now I just want to focus on captain. And you know what? That's good. Don't bullshit the chief. But it's also okay at some point to say, hey, chief, you know, while I am preparing for cap right now and I want to do the best job that I can to be the best captain that I can be, there is a time in the future that, given that I have a number of years left, I do want to focus on other future opportunities, whether they be battalion chief or above. You know, because maybe that plants a seed in the chief's head of going, you know what, okay, there's someone that I could maybe, you know, maybe you're not ready for deputy chief yet, but you know what, give you some time in the seat as battalion chief, that can be some good stuff. So good chiefs are looking for future growth so they don't have to hire from the outside. I talked about don't BS the chief. They've usually seen a lot, heard a lot, and they've heard all the BS. Don't assume they know you and of you. A lot of people will think that, well, the chief has my resume, he has my application, I've worked with the chief for years, and we used to be firefighters together. Don't assume they know everything about you. I mean, even if they've worked with you, there's still probably things they don't know about you. So I guess the key is, don't assume just because you got a piece of paper in front of them that it speaks for itself. You have to treat the fire chief in some ways just like you've never met them before. I mean, I don't mean that in a rude way. I mean, you're always respectful and tactful, but don't leave points on the table is what I'm saying, because I've heard a lot of chiefs say after interviews, man, I didn't know that that individual had that skill set or that knowledge or that experience. I'm glad I asked them the question. I'm glad they brought it out. Or then I've also heard the same thing after the fact of going, well, the chief should have promoted me because I had this. Did you tell them? Well, no, they should have known. Well, how do they know? They've got a lot of people they're leading right now. As I mentioned, they'll probably have notes from the previous portion of the testing process, meaning they may have already looked at what the oral board raters said or what the other parts of the promotional process was. You know, so if you had a simulation exercise, a writing exercise, a personnel counseling scenario, an oral interview, they probably already saw your scores and your ratings, the comments from the raters, and maybe they're going to ask you follow-up questions, because it's not uncommon for the chief to ask the raters, hey, if you have any follow-up questions for me when I get to the chief's interview, please let me know. You know, again, to help the chief make the best possible decision. So, hey, this should be obvious by now, but nothing in your career or your life is a slam dunk until you're retired or dead and gone. I mean, it sounds morbid, but don't take anything for granted. We're not entitled to anything in life short of birth, death, and taxes, as they say. So don't count your chickens before they're hatched. Enjoy your current position. And you know what? Just because you want to promote doesn't mean that that's the best thing for you at the time. Like I said earlier and in previous episodes, there's days I wish I was a fire chief, and there's days where I'm going, you know what? Happy to be a deputy chief. And there's other days where I'm going, wish I was driving the fire engine or tillering the tiller truck or riding backwards even. Hey, you know what? I enjoy what I do. I hope you enjoy what you do. That's the key to a happy, successful career and ultimately life, that you can look back at your career and say, you know what? I'm glad I had some great opportunities, and you found that perfect place for you in the fire department. So as always, thank you very much for the gift of your time. Feel free to reach out to me, connect with me on social media, and hopefully at some point our paths will cross in the future. So until the next time, y'all take care, stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.